The wind, a relentless sculptor of the Colorado Territory's high plains, etched its signature deep into the landscape. Manuel Herrera came to intimately understand this harsh reality during his first winter in 1882, a season when frost flowered on the inside of his cabin floor and his water bucket surrendered to the icy grip of the night, transforming into a solid block by morning. He had meticulously constructed his cabin, adhering to the time-honored methods passed down through generations of homesteaders: tight-fitting log walls, a robust stone fireplace, and standard floor joists, all tried and tested. Yet, by February, he had devoured a staggering amount of cordwood, enough to fuel 2 families through the winter, and still, the insidious cold snaked its way through the floorboards, a chilling reminder of the plains' unforgiving nature. Across the vast territory, countless other settlers waged the same losing battle, huddled in cabins built according to the book, each one a testament to human ingenuity failing in the face of nature's raw power. Neighbors greeted Manuel's musings about Spanish tunnels beneath the floor with laughter and skepticism, dismissing them as fanciful notions. But over the next 2 years, in quiet defiance of local wisdom, Manuel painstakingly resurrected an ancient technique gleaned from his grandfather's fading memories, a system that miraculously kept his floor a comfortable 45 degrees Fahrenheit warmer, while consuming only a third of the fuel. Now, let's dissect the precise steps and underlying principles of this nearly forgotten system. What understanding did Manuel possess about manipulating heat beneath a frontier cabin, a secret that eluded every other settler? The homestead claims sprawled across 640 acres of unforgiving prairie, where the wind was a constant companion and timber grew sparsely, clinging to life along the distant, meandering creek beds. Manuel Herrera had officially filed his claim in the spring of '82, gambling his future on land that whispered promises of fertile soil, but delivered only a thin veneer of topsoil resting upon a foundation of broken shale, which shattered under the plow's persistent assault. His nearest neighbor resided 3 miles to the east, and the closest settlement, boasting the indispensable general store, lay a grueling 2-day ride south, through terrain that transformed into a treacherous maze when winter storms descended from the imposing mountains. By October, Manuel had completed his cabin, meticulously following every manual and guide circulating among homesteaders throughout the Colorado Territory. The structure measured a modest 16 feet by 24 feet, with walls constructed from local ponderosa pine logs, each piece carefully selected, precisely fitted, and chinked with a mixture of mud and prairie grass, creating a barrier against the elements. He had strategically positioned the stone fireplace on the gable end, precisely as recommended, utilizing field stones laboriously hauled from a creek bed 5 miles to the north. The floor consisted of split pine planks laid across sturdy joists, which in turn rested directly on low stone piers, creating the standard frontier cabin design that had sheltered countless settlers across the high plains. The first serious cold arrived with the winds of November, plummeting temperatures to a bone-chilling 10 degrees below zero and anchoring them there for days. Manuel fed his fireplace relentlessly, burning cord after cord of precious ponderosa and juniper wood, resources he had spent weeks cutting and hauling, his body aching with the effort. The fire roared within the hearth, and the air nearest the flames grew momentarily warm, but the heat, with an innate desire for freedom, rose straight up and escaped through the roof, while the floor remained stubbornly and brutally cold. Every morning, he awoke to find delicate frost patterns etched onto the inside surfaces of his windows and ice crystals forming in his water bucket, despite his vigilance in maintaining a fire throughout the night. 3 miles east, his neighbor, Thomas Brennan, grappled with identical problems in a cabin built to the very same specifications. Brennan, in a slight variation, had constructed his floor joists a little closer to the unforgiving ground, and the relentless cycle of heating and cooling caused his floorboards to warp and shrink, creating gaps that allowed icy drafts to whistle upwards from below. The constant expansion and contraction tormented him, turning his timbers into an orchestra of squeaks and groans throughout the long, dark nights. By December, his floor had developed a permanent bow, transforming the simple act of walking across the cabin into a sensation akin to traversing the deck of a storm-tossed ship. To the north, the widowed Catherine Morrison struggled in her smaller cabin, where a single night of neglecting the fire, allowing it to dwindle too low, resulted in a thick layer of frost blanketing her floor by dawn. She lost a week's worth of painstakingly stored vegetables when they froze solid, and her bedding became damp from condensation that formed when the warm air from the fire encountered the frigid surfaces throughout the cabin. Morrison exhausted her entire winter wood supply by January and was forced to spend the remaining cold months burning furniture and even floorboards in a desperate attempt to stay alive. These failures followed a consistent pattern across the territory. Settlers faithfully built their cabins according to instructions, positioned their heating sources precisely where the manuals indicated, and yet they found themselves burning enormous quantities of scarce fuel while enduring floors that remained as cold as the frozen earth outside. The accepted wisdom, passed down through generations, held that a simple fire within the living space was sufficient, that heat would naturally permeate and warm the entire cabin, and that any additional complexity was an unnecessary luxury, ill-suited to the demands of frontier life. But Manuel had grown up with different stories, tales whispered by the elders. His grandfather, Miguel Herrera, had immigrated from a village near Segovia in the heart of Castile, bringing with him vivid memories of stone houses that remained warm throughout the harsh mountain winters, employing methods passed down through countless generations. As a young boy, Manuel had listened, captivated, to descriptions of houses where the fire burned outside the main living room, but heat traveled through carefully constructed channels beneath the floor, warming the living space from below, a gentle, pervasive warmth that defied the outside chill. His grandfather called the system Gloria, explaining how it consumed less fuel than open fires while keeping floors warm enough to walk barefoot, even in the most frigid weather. The stories had seemed like quaint old country tales until Manuel experienced his first Colorado winter and recognized the fundamental flaw in the prevailing frontier heating wisdom. Standard cabin design treated heat as an invisible force that simply filled the air, ignoring the fundamental reality that warm air, by its very nature, rises and escapes, while cold surfaces relentlessly draw heat away from anyone attempting to live above them. His grandfather's stories described a radically different approach, one that captured heat and strategically delivered it precisely where people needed it most, at their feet. When Manuel hesitantly mentioned the possibility of constructing heating channels beneath his floor, the reaction from his neighbors and local authorities was swift and overwhelmingly dismissive. Thomas Brennan declared the idea to be foreign nonsense and warned that digging beneath a cabin floor would weaken the foundation and risk catastrophic collapse. The homestead inspector, during his late winter visit, meticulously examined Manuel's standard cabin, declared it properly built, and openly laughed at any suggestions of Spanish tunnels that would unnecessarily complicate a simple and proven design. Even a merchant who sold supplies in the nearest settlement scoffed at the notion of external fireplaces and underground channels, insisting that frontier life demanded simple solutions, not elaborate European contraptions that would waste precious time and materials. A good stove inside your house is all any sensible man needs, he declared with unwavering conviction, dismissing centuries of heating wisdom as impractical fancy work. But Manuel carried within him a different kind of knowledge. For 3 years prior to homesteading, he had worked as a maintenance laborer for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, learning the intricate art of working with brick and stone in remote locations where structures had to endure harsh weather with minimal maintenance. He possessed a deep understanding of masonry construction and recognized that the heating system his grandfather described was not an exotic decoration, but a practical engineering solution specifically designed for conditions remarkably similar to those he now faced on the Colorado plains. The central conflict crystallized through his first brutal winter. The accepted frontier wisdom, preaching that simple interior fires provided adequate heating, had proven woefully inadequate for achieving true comfort or efficiency in the harsh environment of the high plains. Manuel possessed the knowledge of an alternative approach, one that promised to solve the fundamental problems plaguing every cabin in the territory. But implementing that knowledge would require him to boldly reject the established methods, the very methods that every authority insisted were sufficient and proper for frontier life. Manuel commenced construction in late March of 1883, when the ground had thawed sufficiently to allow digging, and the spring runoff had replenished the creek beds with the fieldstones he would desperately need. The Gloria system demanded a complete reimagining of the relationship between the fire, the structure, and the living space. Instead of allowing heat to rise uselessly into the air, the system would capture the hot gases produced by combustion and force them to travel horizontally beneath the floor, efficiently transferring their thermal energy to a mass of masonry that would then radiate warmth upward into the cabin for hours after the fire had died down. The first challenge involved the daunting task of raising his existing floor to create the necessary void space for the heating channel. Manuel carefully removed his floorboards and extended each floor joist upward by adding 6 inches of height, utilizing mortise and tenon joints reinforced with hand-forged iron brackets, a testament to his skill and determination. This elevation served multiple purposes beyond simply making room for the ductwork. The higher floor created an insulating air gap between the living space and the perpetually cold ground. The additional height allowed for the creation of a proper slope for the heating channel, ensuring that the hot gases would flow efficiently from the firebox to the chimney. Creating the channel itself demanded masonry skills that Manuel had honed during his railroad work, skills he now adapted to the specific requirements of the Gloria system. He excavated a trench 18 inches wide and 12 inches deep that ran the full length of his cabin, from the planned external firebox location on the south wall to the chimney position on the north end, a subterranean artery that would carry the lifeblood of the heating system. The trench followed a carefully calculated slope of approximately 1 inch for every 4 feet of length, meticulously ensuring that hot gases would flow naturally through the channel without requiring mechanical assistance. The channel walls demanded materials that could withstand repeated heating and cooling cycles while retaining and slowly releasing thermal energy, acting as a thermal battery. Manuel hauled fieldstones from Willow Creek, carefully selecting flat pieces of red sandstone that split cleanly and could be fitted together with minimal gaps, creating a smooth, efficient conduit for the heat. He mixed mortar using clay sourced from the creek bed, combined with lime he purchased from a kiln operator 30 miles south, creating a binding agent that would flex slightly with temperature changes rather than cracking like pure clay or a lime mortar. The actual construction of the channel walls demanded a level of precision that far exceeded typical frontier masonry work. Each stone had to be precisely positioned to create smooth interior surfaces that would allow hot gases to flow without turbulence while maximizing contact between the flowing heat and the masonry mass, ensuring optimal heat transfer. Manuel built the walls 8 inches thick, utilizing larger stones for the exterior faces and filling the centers with smaller pieces and mortar, creating a robust and well-insulated barrier. The interior surface of each wall was carefully smoothed and sealed to prevent heat loss through cracks or gaps, minimizing thermal leakage. Above the stone walls, Manuel constructed an arched roof for the heating channel, utilizing a technique he remembered from his work on railroad bridges, a testament to the enduring power of memory and skill. He built a temporary wooden form, then laid thin, flat stones in an arch pattern, each piece supporting its neighbors and locked in place with mortar joints, a structural marvel beneath his cabin floor. This arch design distributed the weight of the floorboards and furniture above, while creating the maximum interior space for hot gas flow, maximizing efficiency. The arch also provided structural strength that allowed the channel to support heavy loads without cracking or settling, ensuring its longevity. The most critical element was the connection points where the heating channel met the firebox and the chimney, the heart and lungs of the system. At the firebox end, Manuel created a throat opening 8 inches wide and 6 inches high, meticulously sized to create sufficient draft while preventing the rapid escape of heat that would waste precious fuel. The opening angled downward slightly to guide hot gases into the horizontal channel and prevent backdraft during windy conditions, ensuring consistent performance. At the chimney end, the channel connected to a vertical flue that Manuel built using the same red sandstone, but with a different internal configuration. The chimney incorporated a series of baffles, horizontal stone shelves that forced the cooling gases to change direction multiple times before escaping, extracting every last bit of heat. These baffles extracted additional heat from the exhaust gases, transferring it to the chimney mass, which then radiated warmth into the cabin long after the fire ended, a thermal afterglow. Support for the raised floor came from a series of masonry piers that Manuel strategically positioned to distribute weight while accommodating the heating channel below, providing a solid foundation. Each pier consisted of stacked fieldstones, rising from below ground level to the height of the new floor joists. The piers nearest the heating channel incorporated special features, hollowed centers that connected to smaller, secondary channels branching off from the main duct. These subsidiary channels allowed some hot gases to circulate around the pier bases, warming additional masonry mass and extending the heated area beyond the main channel path, a subtle but significant improvement. The system incorporated one innovation that Manuel developed specifically for frontier conditions. Rather than using the solid stone floor slabs common in Castilian Gloria installations, he designed a hybrid approach that combined the thermal mass benefits of masonry with the practical advantages of wooden floorboards, adapting tradition to the realities of his new life. Directly above the heating channel, he laid a course of thin sandstone slabs that would absorb and slowly release heat, acting as a thermal reservoir. Above these stones, he installed his original wooden floorboards, creating a composite floor that provided thermal storage while remaining suitable for frontier furniture and daily use. Testing began in October, when night temperatures first dropped below freezing, a crucial test of his hard work. Manuel built a small fire in the external firebox using dry pine from his woodpile and carefully monitored the system's performance. Hot gases entered the channel smoothly and traveled the full 15-foot length before exiting through the chimney. The stone surfaces grew warm to the touch within 20 minutes, and heat began radiating upward through the floor slabs and wooden boards above, a testament to the efficiency of his design. The thermal performance exceeded his expectations. Where his original cabin floor had remained within a few degrees of the outdoor temperature, the Gloria heated floor maintained surface temperatures 20 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the outside air, a significant improvement that transformed his living space. More importantly, this warmth persisted for hours after the fire died down, as the heated masonry mass slowly released its stored thermal energy into the living space above, a sustained and comforting warmth. Fuel efficiency proved equally impressive. Manuel found that burning 1.5 cords of wood per month through the Gloria system provided more consistent warmth than the 3 to 4 cords he had previously burned in his standard fireplace, a dramatic reduction in fuel consumption. The system's ability to extract and store heat from combustion gases meant that virtually no thermal energy escaped and used up the chimney, maximizing efficiency. The external firebox represented a radical departure from every heating method used across the Colorado Territory, a bold and innovative move. Instead of placing the fire source within the living space, where it competed with occupants for oxygen and created dangerous drafts, Manuel constructed his combustion chamber outside the south wall of his cabin, in a lean-to structure that isolated the burning process from his daily life, while maximizing heat extraction efficiency, a safer and more efficient design. The firebox itself measured 2 feet square and 18 inches deep, built with the same red sandstone he had used for the Gloria channel, but configured differently to optimize combustion control. The interior walls sloped inward slightly toward the bottom, creating a funnel shape that concentrated heat while allowing complete combustion of even the smallest fuel materials, maximizing efficiency. At the base, Manuel installed a graded floor made from railroad iron bars spaced 1 inch apart, elevating the fuel bed above a shallow ash pit that provided airflow from below while collecting debris, improving combustion and ease of maintenance. The most innovative feature was the adjustable air control system Manuel designed using techniques adapted from railroad maintenance work, a testament to his ingenuity and resourcefulness. He fabricated a sliding iron damper that could restrict or open the air intake at the base of the firebox, allowing precise control over the combustion rate, enabling fine-tuning for optimal performance. Above the fire, a hinged iron cover could partially close the top opening, creating a controlled environment where fuel burns slowly and completely rather than flaring up and wasting heat through rapid combustion, preventing heat loss. This external placement solved multiple problems that plagued frontier heating, creating a healthier and more comfortable living environment. No smoke entered the living space, eliminating the constant battle against backdrafts during windy weather, improving air quality. The firebox could accommodate fuel materials that would create excessive smoke or debris if burned indoors, expanding the range of available fuel sources beyond the precious cordwood that settlers struggled to obtain in sufficient quantities, increasing fuel options. Manuel discovered that the controlled combustion environment of his external firebox could effectively burn materials that other settlers discarded as worthless, transforming waste into a valuable resource. Pine needles, collected in great quantities from the scattered ponderosa groves, burned intensely when properly managed, but produced heavy resin smoke that made them unsuitable for indoor fires, a fire hazard. In the external firebox, the smoke contributed to heat production while being safely vented away from the living area through the Gloria channel and chimney system, maximizing resource utilization. Dry brushwood presented another abundant fuel source ignored by conventional heating wisdom, a readily available but underutilized resource. The territory's sparse vegetation produced vast quantities of dead branches, tumbleweeds, and scrub oak that accumulated in ravines and fence lines. These materials burned rapidly in open fires, creating brief, intense heat, followed by a quick burnout that wasted most of their energy potential. In Manuel's controlled system, the same brushwood could be made to burn slowly and steadily, releasing its heat over hours rather than minutes, maximizing efficiency. Pine cones represented perhaps the most overlooked fuel resource on the high plains, a truly untapped potential. The scattered ponderosa and lodgepole pines dropped enormous quantities of cones each fall, creating piles of resin-rich organic matter that settlers typically raked aside or burned in waste fires. Manuel found that pine cones burned exceptionally well in his controlled system, producing intense heat with minimal ash while consuming completely when given adequate airflow control, a clean and efficient fuel source. The combustion management techniques required an understanding of principles that went beyond simply lighting fires, demanding a nuanced understanding of the process. Manuel learned to load his firebox in layers, with fine materials like pine needles at the bottom to establish initial heat, followed by brushwood to maintain steady burning, and finally larger pieces like pine cones or small branches to provide sustained fuel, optimizing the burn. The key was controlling the air supply to maintain combustion at the optimal rate for heat extraction rather than rapid fuel consumption, maximizing efficiency. During a typical firing sequence, Manuel would open both the bottom damper and top cover fully while lighting the initial fuel load, creating maximum airflow for quick ignition, ensuring a quick start. Once the fire established itself and the heating channel began warming, he would partially close the top cover and reduce the bottom air supply, slowing the burn rate while maintaining sufficient heat production to keep gases flowing through the Gloria system, regulating the heat output. The timing of this combustion control proved critical to system efficiency. Too much air produced rapid burning that sent most of the heat up the chimney before the masonry could absorb it, wasting fuel. Too little air caused incomplete combustion and excessive smoke that could clog the heating channel, reducing efficiency and potentially causing safety issues. Manuel developed a technique of monitoring the temperature of the stones around the channel entrance, adjusting airflow to maintain steady heat without overheating the masonry or wasting fuel through excessive draft, optimizing performance and preventing damage. One crucial discovery emerged during his first winter of operation, a subtle but significant advantage. The external firebox location allowed him to tend the fire without entering the heated living space, preventing heat loss through open doors and eliminating the indoor air disturbance caused by feeding fires within the cabin, maintaining a stable temperature. He could load fuel, adjust dampers, and clean ash without affecting the stable thermal environment he had created inside his home, maximizing comfort. The fuel preparation process became a year-round activity rather than the seasonal woodcutting that occupied most settlers, transforming a seasonal chore into a continuous, sustainable practice. Manuel collected pine needles throughout the summer, storing them in a lean-to structure where they dried completely and remained readily available, creating a readily accessible supply. Brushwood gathering occurred during his regular activities around the homestead, requiring no special expeditions to distant timber sources, integrating fuel collection into his daily routine. Pine cone collection happened naturally during his other outdoor work, accumulating supplies that would last through extended cold periods, providing a consistent and reliable supply. Testing during December of 1883 revealed the dramatic efficiency improvements this system provided, showcasing the benefits of his innovation. A typical firing using 2 bushel baskets of mixed small fuels, pine needles, brushwood, and pine cones, burned intensely for 30 minutes, then continued smoldering for another 2 hours under controlled airflow. The slow burn phase extracted maximum heat from the fuel while maintaining gas flow through the heating channel, warming the floor mass without requiring constant attention or fuel addition, providing consistent warmth with minimal effort. The fuel consumption comparison with his neighbors proved startling, highlighting the efficiency of his system. Where Thomas Brennan burned 6 cords of precious ponderosa logs during December, Manuel used materials equivalent to approximately 2 cords while achieving superior heating performance, a significant reduction in fuel consumption. His floor remained warm enough for comfortable barefoot walking, even on mornings when outside temperatures dropped below zero, while Brennan continued struggling with floors that barely rose above freezing despite continuous wood burning, showcasing the tangible benefits of his innovation. Perhaps most significantly, Manuel's fuel sources renewed themselves naturally each year through normal forest processes, while his neighbors faced the increasingly difficult task of locating, cutting, and hauling ever more distant timber resources, creating a sustainable and environmentally friendly heating solution. The controlled combustion system had transformed waste materials into reliable heating fuel, creating a sustainable energy source perfectly suited to the resource constraints of frontier life, a truly remarkable achievement. The spring thaw of 1884 revealed problems that Manuel had not anticipated during his system's initial winter operation, highlighting the challenges of innovation. As snowmelt saturated the ground around his cabin and temperatures fluctuated daily between freezing and 40 degrees Fahrenheit, moisture began accumulating in the void space beneath his raised floor, creating a humid environment. The heated masonry had created a microclimate that attracted condensation, and without proper air circulation, this moisture threatened to undermine everything he had accomplished, posing a new challenge. The first sign of trouble appeared as a musty odor rising through his floorboards in early April, a warning sign of potential issues. When Manuel removed several boards to investigate, he discovered droplets of water clinging to the underside of his floor and pooling in low spots of the Gloria Channel, confirming his fears. The problem stemmed from the temperature differential between the heated masonry mass and the cooling spring air, creating conditions similar to those inside a root cellar, where warm, moist air condensed on cooler surfaces, creating a breeding ground for mold and decay. More concerning was the discovery that his carefully mortared channel joints had developed hairline cracks where repeated heating and cooling cycles had caused thermal expansion and contraction, a structural weakness in his design. These tiny fissures allowed moisture to penetrate the masonry structure and created pathways for potentially dangerous gases to seep backward from the heating system into his living space during periods when the firebox was not operating, posing a serious health risk. Manuel recognized that his Gloria system needed active ventilation to function safely year-round, not just during the heating season, requiring a new approach. The solution required an understanding of principles of air movement that went beyond simple combustion draft, demanding a more sophisticated understanding of thermodynamics. He needed to create controlled airflow that would remove excess moisture during spring and summer while providing cooling circulation that could make his cabin comfortable during the brutal heat of Colorado's high plain summers, creating a more livable environment. The ventilation system he designed incorporated elements from both Roman hypocaust technology and practical frontier construction, blending ancient knowledge with contemporary needs. Manuel installed 2 vertical clay tile flues that connected to the Gloria Channel at points approximately 5 feet from each end, creating a balanced airflow. These flues rose through the cabin walls and extended 18 inches above the roofline, creating a natural draft that would continuously draw air through the underfloor space, even when no fire was burning, promoting constant ventilation. Each ventilation flue measured 4 inches in internal diameter, sized to provide adequate airflow without creating excessive heat loss during winter operation, carefully balancing ventilation and heat retention. The clay tiles came from a pottery works in Denver, transported by railroad, and then hauled to his homestead by wagon, a long and arduous journey. Manuel joined the tiles with the same clay-lime mortar he used for the Gloria Channel, ensuring that the ventilation system would expand and contract with temperature changes without developing leaks, maintaining its structural integrity. The key innovation was a seasonal damper system that allowed Manuel to control airflow through these ventilation flues depending on weather conditions, adapting the system to the changing seasons. During the winter heating season, he could partially close dampers in each flue to prevent excessive heat loss while maintaining enough airflow to remove any moisture that might accumulate, preventing heat loss while maintaining ventilation. During summer months, he could open the dampers fully and also open a larger vent at floor level, creating a cooling system that drew hot air out of his cabin and pulled cooler air up through the Gloria Channel from beneath the floor, providing natural air conditioning. Sealing the masonry against moisture infiltration required developing a mortar mixture specifically formulated for the thermal cycling that the Gloria system created, addressing the structural weaknesses in his original design. Manuel's original clay-lime mortar had proven adequate for construction, but lacked the flexibility needed for long-term durability under repeated heating and cooling. He experimented with different ratios of clay, lime, and sand, finally settling on a mixture that incorporated chopped grass fibers as a binding agent that allowed the mortar to flex slightly without cracking, improving its resilience. The improved mortar consisted of 3 parts clay from Willow Creek, 2 parts lime, 1 part coarse sand, and chopped buffalo grass that he gathered from nearby prairie areas, utilizing locally sourced materials. The grass fibers, cut to lengths of approximately 1 inch, were distributed throughout the mortar matrix and created microscopic reinforcement that prevented thermal stress from developing into visible cracks, improving its structural integrity. This biomimetic approach drew on. Manuel employed construction techniques gleaned from his grandfather's tales of adobe structures in their ancestral Spanish village. Resealing the cabin required meticulous work, carefully excavating the old mortar from the joints and applying the new mixture during a stretch of mild weather, crucial for ensuring consistent temperatures over several days. Manuel systematically addressed his entire system, with particular attention to the critical junctures between the horizontal channel and the vertical chimney and ventilation flue, where thermal stress was most pronounced. The impact of his summer cooling innovations on the cabin's comfort during the scorching Colorado summers was undeniable. When the mercury climbed to 90 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, Manuel could open the floor-level vent and fully extend the ventilation flue dampers. This clever arrangement created a natural airflow, drawing the stifling hot air out of his living space and replacing it with cooler air that had been in constant contact with the thermal mass of his Gloria Channel and the earth beneath the cabin. This ingenious cooling system mirrored the principles behind the Spanish courtyards and thick-walled buildings his grandfather had described from Castile, where thermal mass and carefully managed airflow generated comfortable interior climates without relying on any mechanical devices. The very masonry that stored heat during the winter months transformed into a cooling asset during the summer, absorbing heat from the incoming air and gradually releasing it through the ventilation system. Testing during the summer of 1884 revealed the system's effectiveness extending far beyond winter heating. While neighboring cabins became practically uninhabitable during the hottest days, with interior temperatures soaring 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit above the already sweltering outside air due to solar heating of walls and roofs, Manuel's cabin remained consistently cooler than the outside temperature. The combined effect of thermal mass and controlled ventilation kept his interior a remarkable 12 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the outdoor air during the peak afternoon heat. The moisture control proved equally successful throughout the spring thaw and into the humid conditions of the summer thunderstorm season. Manuel's underfloor space remained remarkably dry and free from the mold and mildew problems that plagued many frontier buildings built directly on the ground. The continuous, gentle airflow through his ventilation system efficiently removed excess humidity before it could condense and threaten structural timbers or stored goods. By the autumn of 1884, Manuel had achieved a true 4-season environmental control system, providing heating, cooling, moisture control, and ventilation using only natural forces and the time-honored principles of masonry thermal mass. The system required no ongoing fuel input during the summer months, yet it consistently enhanced his living conditions through passive climate control, drawing upon the Earth's stable underground temperatures and the thermal flywheel effect of his heated masonry mass. An inspection after 6 months of year-round operation revealed that his improved mortar joints remained crack-free and his ventilation flue functioned precisely as intended. The Gloria system had evolved from a simple heating solution into a comprehensive environmental control technology, ideally suited to the extreme seasonal variations of the Colorado Territory's high plains climate. The winter of 1885 to 1886 descended with unprecedented severity upon the Colorado Territory. By mid-January, a high-pressure system had settled over the Rocky Mountains, creating conditions that local weather observers would later record as the most sustained cold period in territorial history. Nighttime temperatures plummeted to a bone-chilling 18 degrees below zero Fahrenheit and remained there for days, while daytime highs struggled to reach a mere 8 degrees above zero, even under the clearest sunshine. The brutal cold snap began on January 15th and continued relentlessly for 17 days, accompanied by sustained winds reaching 30 miles per hour, creating snowdrifts that blocked roads and isolated homesteads throughout the region. These conditions presented the ultimate test for every heating system across the High Plains, ruthlessly separating functional solutions from inadequate ones with a life-or-death clarity that left no room for theoretical discussions or polite disagreements about heating philosophy. Thomas Brennan's troubles began within the first 3 days. His indoor fireplace, burning continuously day and night, failed to prevent ice from forming on his cabin walls. His floorboards contracted so severely in the frigid temperatures that gaping cracks appeared between them, creating pathways for icy drafts to surge upward from the space beneath his cabin. By the end of the first week, Brennan was burning through a full cord of precious ponderosa logs every 2 days, a consumption rate that threatened to exhaust his entire winter wood supply before the cold snap even ended. The widow, Catherine Morrison, faced even more desperate circumstances. Her smaller cabin and limited wood supply forced her to ration fuel, allowing her fire to dwindle during the night to conserve logs for daytime heating. On the morning of January 20th, she awoke to find her water bucket frozen solid and frost covering every surface inside her cabin, including the blankets on her bed. The extreme cold had penetrated so thoroughly that her food stores began to freeze, even though they were kept near the fireplace, threatening her survival throughout the remainder of the winter. 3 miles north, homesteader James Crawford experienced the structural failure that Manuel had long predicted would result from extreme thermal cycling. Crawford's cabin, built with slightly green timber that had not fully seasoned, suffered catastrophic warping as repeated heating and cooling cycles caused his floor joists to twist and his floorboards to buckle. By January 25th, gaps between his floorboards had widened to the point where small objects could fall through, and cold air rushed through these openings with such force that his fireplace could barely maintain temperatures above freezing, even while consuming enormous quantities of fuel. Manuel's response to the crisis demonstrated the full potential of his integrated Gloria system under extreme conditions. Each morning throughout the cold snap, he loaded his external firebox with approximately 3 bushel baskets of mixed small fuels, pine needles, dry brushwood, and pine cones that he had diligently collected and stored throughout the previous year. The controlled combustion process he had perfected allowed this relatively modest fuel load to burn steadily for 8 to 10 hours, with the thermal mass of his heating channel storing and slowly releasing heat long after the flames died down. The temperature measurements Manuel meticulously recorded during this period revealed the dramatic performance advantage his system provided. Using a mercury thermometer positioned on his floor near the center of his cabin, he documented interior temperatures that remained consistently between 38 and 42 degrees Fahrenheit, even during the coldest nights when outside air plummeted to 18 below zero. This remarkable 60 degrees differential represented a level of thermal protection that none of his neighbors could achieve, despite burning 3 to 4 times as much fuel. More significantly, Manuel's floor surface temperatures, measured by pressing the thermometer bulb directly against the floorboards, registered between 45 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the cold snap. This meant that his living space remained not just habitable, but genuinely comfortable, allowing him to walk barefoot, work at his table without heavy clothing, and sleep under normal bedding rather than the multiple layers of blankets and furs that his neighbors required for survival. The fuel consumption comparison provided stark evidence of the system's efficiency. Manuel's total fuel use during the 17-day cold snap amounted to approximately 51 bushel baskets of small materials, equivalent to roughly 2 cords of conventional firewood. Meanwhile, Thomas Brennan burned between 8 and 12 cords of split logs. Catherine Morrison exhausted her entire remaining wood supply of 6 cords, and James Crawford consumed 7 cords, while still suffering from inadequate heating and structural damage. The crisis reached its peak on January 28 when Crawford arrived at Manuel's cabin, seeking emergency shelter after his own heating system had failed completely. Crawford had run out of accessible firewood when drifting snow blocked the path to his woodpile, and his damaged floor allowed so much cold air infiltration that his cabin had become uninhabitable despite desperate efforts to maintain a fire, using furniture and floorboards as fuel. This emergency demonstrated another crucial advantage of Manuel's system: its independence from large timber resources and its ability to function using materials that remained accessible even during severe weather. While his neighbors struggled to reach distant wood piles through deep snow and fought to split frozen logs with numbed hands, Manuel simply gathered pine needles and small branches from areas immediately around his cabin that the wind kept partially clear. The social impact of Manuel's success during the crisis marked the beginning of a fundamental shift in local attitudes toward heating technology. When James Crawford spent 3 days recovering in Manuel's consistently warm cabin, while his own structure remained uninhabitable, he experienced firsthand the comfort and reliability that the Gloria system provided. Crawford became the first neighbor to request detailed instruction in building his own underfloor heating channel. By early February, as the cold snap finally broke and normal winter temperatures returned, Thomas Brennan and Catherine Morrison also approached Manuel, seeking guidance. Brennan had calculated that his fuel consumption during the crisis would leave him short of heating supplies for the remainder of the winter unless he adopted a more efficient system. Morrison recognized that her survival during any future cold snaps depended on finding an alternative to her inadequate fireplace heating. The requests for instruction marked a cultural turning point that extended beyond individual heating solutions. For 3 years, Manuel's Spanish tunnels had been dismissed as unnecessary foreign complexity, unsuited to practical frontier life. The extreme test of the 1885 to 1886 winter had provided undeniable proof that traditional European heating wisdom, properly adapted to local conditions and materials, offered superior performance to accepted American frontier methods. Word of Manuel's success spread throughout the region as neighbors shared stories of the dramatic differences in comfort, fuel consumption, and structural integrity they had witnessed during the crisis. Local carpenter William Hayes, who had initially mocked the Gloria system as impractical fancy work, arrived in March, requesting a partnership in building similar installations for other homesteaders who had heard about Manuel's performance during the cold snap. The documentation of these results, recorded in letters sent to relatives in settled regions and in reports to territorial authorities, created the first written record of successful hypocaust-style heating adaptation to American frontier conditions. These accounts would later influence territorial building recommendations and contribute to the gradual acceptance of masonry heating systems throughout the Rocky Mountain region. By 1890, survey records from the Territorial Land Office documented at least 12 homestead cabins in the immediate region that incorporated underfloor masonry heating channels based on Manuel's original design. The system had evolved from an individual experiment into a recognized regional building technique that offered proven advantages for settlers facing the extreme climate conditions of Colorado's high-elevation plains.